Hello and most welcome to today's YouTube clip. And we are going to bring up sort of a successor to Gibson, John Gibson. And it's Anthony Chemero. J. Gibson inspired Chemero, and he is one of the leading figures in something called radical embodied cognitive science. And he's coming out with a new book in March.
26. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Yes, that's going to be very interesting. And I want to look at one of the main points here. Because this is incredibly radical. Because one of the more intuitive and important intuition we have about what thinking is a sort of inner monologue, or something that is often depicted in comics with these round squares ending in a big square, and there it says something, I don't know, could be anything, anger or something similar.
Money.
So this idea of an inner monologue that is made of either words or images is questioned here, or at least it's shown to be not that simple as we usually perceive. This is actually very close to points made by Heidegger and Ludwig Wittgenstein, especially the latter Wittgenstein, as we see him in philosophical investigations, for instance. And this is so interesting. It has been many years on my part I haven't found anything so interesting. Actually, come to think about it, I don't think I've mentioned anything new in a very long time. Since we took up embodied cognition, ecological psychology, I think nothing new has come. I've been more or less happy what we had. Not unsatisfied, but this is so interesting, so it's well worth an effort. This is question. The idea that thinking is something inside the head, that it is a line of things, it is something that could be potentially expressed somehow, and that it somehow accompanies action or precedes action. Rather, and this is hard to fathom, Anthony Chemero says, it is not something that happens inside of us, but it is a dynamic process occurring between us and the world. A bit like zuhanden, or in the language game. This could be called death of representationalism. Death of representationalism. And now we're talking Saussure, we are talking Bertrand Russell, we are talking about Platonism, the idea that there are absolute depictions of something in the world, and that there are this strange connection somehow between the ideas and the outer realm, that they somehow can get connected. And here Chemero is actually using Heidegger. He's talking about handiness. This is related to zuhanden. And that the idea that once we swing a hammer, for instance, we would need a mental map of what we're doing. Or that there is an explanation needed for the head or inside of the head to sort of help us to do something. So when I want to draw this chair to myself, I need to think to myself, I am now going to take the chair by my hands and I'm going to pull it in my direction. This is absolutely wrong. It wouldn't serve any purpose other than to hinder the very action. Cognition, as a little lead here, is the action. It is not something about something else. There is no distance between cognition and the thing that we cognize. This is called a dynamic coupling. And here Chemero is using something called the dynamical system theory to show that the brain, body and environment are, and listen now, non-linearly coupled. I really like that to put in parentheses. We know from earlier cognitive studies that we made in this series that if you sort of have this inner monologue, or even worse, if you speak to yourself, you hinder your actions because you are waking up in Ian McGilchrist's explanations where the left hemisphere, that would actually stop you from being able to do what you want to do. So that's a good hint for you. Never ever say something when you do something, because that will stop you. It evokes the verbal brain, and it has nothing to see with what you actually do. Rather, what is happening is like two dancers that are in a dance that is called reality. Isn't that nice? Inside and outside are having a dance. Why not a samba or a salsa? I can think of something feisty, dynamic. And you can never understand the dancer only by looking to their brains. The inside does not explain the outside. My inside does not, in contrast to Descartes and so many other thinkers, philosophers, and a lot of cognitive scientists, does not mirror a sort of outside. No, to understand the process or what's happening or what exists, you need the dancer and his or her environment. The second strand, this is the first strand, the second strand is that thinking is doing. I think we remember this a bit from Benjamin Berger, who said that talking is done in the action area. And once you do something, you can understand what that is. And there is no understanding what the cycle is without being able to cycle. You need to be able to do it. So this is a rather hard attack on the Platonic idea that things exist somehow apart from our knowledge about them, or especially, to be much more precise, our skill. It doesn't really make any sense to say, I know what a bike is if you can't drive it or cycle it. It doesn't make any sense at all. And of course, there is no longer bike or non-bike. It's a scale of bike depending on how good you are at sort of cycling it. So Chemero says there is no thought that happens before an action. The action is the cognition. This is so good, I'm going to write it up. I don't know if this is visible. Thinking is doing. And it aligns perfectly with your idea that skill is thinking. The more skilled we are, the more precise are our thoughts. So that means, in parallel also with Benjamin Berger, Heidegger and Wittgenstein, without practicing your skills, you will not be able to think. You cannot think or understand something you haven't encountered or practiced. We had a lot of discussions about this in the university, and the modern university, in neo-academia, think that you can have knowledge just by reading from a book. You cannot, this is proven wrong. Actually what happens is you get an illusion of knowledge. You can speak in a certain way that you can express to other people so they get tricked that you have knowledge. But according to neuroscience, that is impossible. And this is also the main point in Heidegger and Wittgenstein. The very idea that there's some abstracted thinking, Heidegger will think is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And this is proven even more with the development of AI. Because AI can copy that talking, can copy that writing, and can do it even better than us without being able to do anything. AI still to this day has not encountered the world. AI does not have a body. Even a cat beats AI because AI can still not jump in between chairs, for instance. So it's not very advanced. So there's an example here. A skilled carpenter, the one with the hammer and the saw, is not thinking about the wood, but their intelligence is expressed through the fluid, a responsive way they engage with the wood's resistance. Is working with the material that thinking is the very dance in betweenness. I like this in betweenness because we talked about that before. We had this philosopher who we were in contact with who was talking about fractality. I think her name was Tarlov. It's not very important now, but it is close to fractality. The Norwegian coast, we mentioned many times, doesn't really see a difference between outside and inside. The very idea that there could be an absolute outside in the Norwegian coast, it's a sort of nonsense. Following James Gibson, I think I said John Gibson before, this is now corrected, it was a bit early and before coffee. Chemero argues that we perceive the world directly. We don't see objects. This nonsensical idea with a free-floating object that you can describe or explain. This is a hard and really weird way of misusing language to describe something when actually a cup is its use. Nothing else. We see affordances. When we say that we think cup, we see the affordances of cuppingness, or the verb, a possibility for action. A chair is never perceived as a wooden structure. It is perceived as sittable. I think this third aspect sounds absolutely self-evident, but it isn't. Because here in this environment, people try to explain things that can only be done. You need to do it. Perception is direct. Without the skill, you cannot understand what it means to cycle. You cannot understand what it is to live in the Canary Islands without having the experience of being there. So these are the three aspects here I want to take up. Cognition as dynamical coupling, thinking is doing, and that perception is direct. I also like this affordances as relations, that they are relatable. I think Ian McGilchrist has said a couple of times, relata becomes before the related, the things related, or the relations come before the relatas. The objects are not that important as the relations in between them. I think that is also a very important point. Everything is coming from relations. Very close also to relational quantum mechanics by Carlo Rovelli. We have the famed Indian philosopher Nagarjuna. So in his radical seminal book, Radical Embodied Cognitive Science, he redefined what an affordance is. It's neither subjective nor objective. The relation of ability to environment. How able are you? How trained are you? An affordance is an understandability, if you like. Horrible word, sorry about that. But without a climbability, there are no stairs. If you do not know how to handle stairs, there are no stairs per se, no matter what Plato used to regard about these things. And it doesn't exist solely in your legs. It exists only in the relation between the height of the step and your physical ability to climb. Your body is important. Your body needs to be engaged. And that also takes away the idea of brain in the vat philosophical problem. The idea that the brain, my consciousness actually could be a brain in a liquid bottle or something like that. That is impossible. Without a body, we also lose the ability to do things and thereby understand. And if you lose the ability somehow, God forbid, the affordance also vanishes. Then also the knowledge disappears. It doesn't matter if the stairs are still there. You will fail to understand them. The between is the reality. That's the third. Yes, indeed. I think this is great. This is really grand. And of course, this flies in the face of all of neo-academia today. Nobody claims that. Actually, what they are doing is more and more and more repeating the classical model until it becomes an illusion. So often repeated, it feels real. But it's proven wrong. It is in the between that everything happens. It is in this quite mysterious area between the inside and the outside where all the magic happens. Isn't that grand?
Oh.
Reality isn't made of things. Understanding is not descriptions. It is made of interactions. You do things. And the third, you can compare it, as I did earlier, with the relata. What relates to different things? The relations before the things that are related. And you can improve yourself. And I think this is very hopeful. I think most people today believe that there is no knowledge. We can only do the repetition of the words, standing isolated with our books and repeat the words and becoming parrots. Something we know today, as I mentioned before, AI easily do. That is not understanding at all. This is the contradiction of understanding. Stiff-neckedness, if you want to, because you destroy your body at the same time. You need to interact to keep your body healthy. So when you improve your poise, when you no longer tense up, because your body is actually the understanding instrument. Your poise, your ability to get up out of yourself, that changes your abilities, and it literally changes the affordances the world offers you. You get more possibility. And here I take something from Alexander technique. Once you get up out of yourself, when you include the whole world and your inside, this is when understanding comes. Another thing is the interaction with the other sensible beings. Something that the early AI didn't seem to find important at all. Most in neo-academia do not understand. I wouldn't say all though. But we go from I, it. What is I, it? Well, that's me and the thing. So this can sort of be done in isolation. So I stand here, I have no contact with other people or other sensitive beings, and I just do the understanding. A bit Cartesian. This is absolutely wrong. Instead we go to I, thou. A much more intimate relation with other people, because what did I say before? Everything is from relations. Without relating, there is no understanding. So you need to relate. If you go to this, you take away knowledge. This is blinding out understanding, and you lose your posture, you lose your body, because you're not doing anything. In contact with other people, you are doing something. You are interacting, you are being humble, you're being loving, you're being caring. Caring is very important in the Heideggerian philosophy as well. Care, he puts extra emphasis on care. You care about the surroundings. You can only care to other human beings, but you can sort of better yourself. This is gaining knowledge. You do that through others. Mirroring is another thing. An important part of understanding is your understanding is what gets mirrored in another person. You do something, you talk, you have a certain posture. You have an indication of an affordance, and that is mirrored in another person. I will not go into mirror neurons, but we know that they are extremely important. You cannot understand in isolation. And this mirroring is happening at an extraordinary speed, and that beats all AIs. And you do the understanding with your whole body, because it's another movement. Although that movement can be very small, can be excruciatingly small. It's what you can call a motor resonance. So you have your two people, you motor resonance. If you're only one, there is no resonance. It's a calming down. You automatically come here. This is not a stance or an ideology. This is where you end up if you do it in isolation. It's knocking down our understanding. We are entangled. I think many people do not believe in quantum mechanics. They think entangled is just a word. No, entangled is how reality works. Therefore, you can only understand if you have entanglement with somebody else or the whole group. Understanding is in the whole community. Once more is Paul Feyerabend, who said, without the total understanding of the whole Hellenic society, the whole Mediterranean, the change from esteem to estaying, to existence, going from the copula be or is to existence wouldn't have happened. So the understanding is not located in the I either. It is in the relation. And that relation is so complex, so extraordinarily refined, and fractal as well, to bring in another word. Sorry about so many names here. I couldn't help myself. I'm just so very, very into this now. So entanglement instead of the classical view that we have here, where you think you can have just an explanation and that is sort of it, and then you can have understanding. You cannot. Calorovel is not wrong. To isolate yourself means that Calorovel or Sir Roger Penrose is wrong. The whole of physics is wrong. and relations are not important. This is actually what the new academia is claiming. Two systems are entangled. They are not absolutely separate. Isn't that fantastic? And one could take a little example. I'm going to take a little bit of that. Little example from how it used to be. How did we learn once upon a time? We learned by imitating. We had a master, and you were the disciple. In India, I think they have the guru Shashya, or disciple. All through Renaissance, Baroque, painters, before mentioned carpenter, they went to a master, they copy his action, and then they learned. In the Orient, they copy a certain handwriting, a doing, not print out scripts. So this you could call, I'm not very fond of that word social because it's a bit cold. I'll use it anyway now. But you could call that, that's the second thing, social affordances. So just as this floor I'm standing on affords walking and dancing, another person affords interaction, understanding, entanglement. A sad face affords comforting. An extended hand affords shaking. This is a very, very important part in the posture. You cannot keep up a good posture by yourself, because in the mirroring activity, you give good posture to other people as well. It is in the interaction you have a good posture. So you could call that, the social world you could call a landscape of affordances. Let's now look at the self. Let's see here. Doesn't seem to be an eraser here. Nothing to do. I managed anyway here. This, of course, can be compared to the monads. Monads, I like this idea with monads who are going into relations. This is an idea from Leibniz. He goes against the idea of atomistic idea, that the things in the universe are isolated. But as he says, the monads do not have any windows, so you can't look into them. So you can't identify them and say, oh, that's a singular monad and that's another monad. No, it is the relations. And this brings me into individual theory. What does it mean to be an individual? Well, if you follow the classical model, you will have no individual, because an individual comes from the entanglement, the relations. And this is something that has great consequences. The classical view makes a huge difference, because if you start to isolate, all of a sudden you are no longer an individual, because an individual can only come from relations. So in stark contrast to the idea that being with others will sort of dilute your individuality, it is just the opposite. You cannot be an individual by yourself, because it is construed by relations. And that also goes over time. Something that's been observed by, I think Heidegger pointed that out. It seems that modern day persons lack a continuous self. We begin all over again. I think in many universities today, when a new term starts, a new semester, as it's called in English, all the old knowledge is gone. Because there is no continuous self-experience anymore. There is no continuous knowledge. You do not, as people used to do, build the new knowledge on the old and sort of accumulate knowledge. What you do today is you are replacing the old knowledge with a new one. Sorry. Of course, extraordinary superficial. Extraordinary superficial. No, the individual doesn't have a sort of inner nucleus that tells you that the individual. You become an individual with interaction with other people. Isolate yourself and you lose yourself. And you also lose your continuity. There is no continuity to self. Everything is forgotten, and forgetfulness has become an idea that you, like a computer, retrieve information in your head. You don't do that. No consciousness works at that. What happens if you forget is that your cognition is not working anymore. Your thinking is not working. Exactly as Friedrich Matthias Alexander said. The thinking capacity has gone down enormously the last century because we are imitating a model that dilutes it. So as a concluding remark, just to compare the traditional view, according to which thinking is inside the head, an internal process, whereas in Chemero, also James Gibson, cognition is interaction, doing. You are out and doing something, either doing with your hands, with your legs, moving about, learning something, doing something. And that can also be done with other people, because that also takes motor skill, because of mirroring neurons and many other things. Skills, according to the traditional view, representationalism, is applied knowledge. So you are like a computer, you read your papers, you put them inside your head, and then somehow you retrieve them and you use them. No, no, no. This is not how it works. Skill is thinking, as done with the whole body. It is in the movement thinking, understanding, intelligence is. There is no difference between skill and intelligence. The traditional view is, and this is getting even graver here, the idea that perception is gathering data. Once more, we have the computer model infecting us and making this even worse. According to Chemero's radical view, perception is more of detecting affordances. That is, employing your skill or even enhancing your skill. That means that every day you live, you become a little bit more skilled. It's a progression. And now, the idea that the self is inside the head. Chemero, it is intertwined, relational. It is entangled. Ignore entanglement and lose. Afford entanglement and gain. And the idea that you have a sort of interpretation. I stand here and I interpret what surrounds me, or maybe what my colleague here is saying to me. I make an interpretation of what he's saying, showing with his posture and his face. That's the traditional view. Chemero means that there is a dynamical coupling. I will not be the same after my encounter with my colleague, because we will mirror each other. Depending on the difference in motor skill, I will develop and he will develop and understanding will come. This is how I learned about history. The first time I really got an understanding of the Great War was going to a British pub and meeting people, John and Henry, who participated in the Great War, who were in the trenches. Directly through mirroring from their bodily knowledge, I could get an understanding. And that understanding is much wider than a mere explanation. There is a constant use, I would say overuse of explanation today. And I think that started with the Newtonian shift. I won't go into that today. So relations, relations, and relations. This is how we learn, this is how we interact. So your liveliness is part of your ability to understand. Shut yourself down and tense. Stop smiling. Stop interacting with other people. Don't talk to other people like we do here in Sweden. And you lose. You lose understanding. So we are looking forward to his book that's coming, I think in March 2026, well this year. And it's called Intertwined Creatures.
Intertwined Creatures.
And he will talk about social ontology. That things that Plato, Socrates would call ontology is coming from the interaction, the interrelation. And also that self is in itself a process. Ignoring that, we lose what I would say continuity. So you are not a continuous person. Instead, you are chopped up, fragmented. You are literally fragmented. You have no sense of a self anymore. You cannot. If you isolate, you do not entangle. Quantum mechanics is right. It is not a wrong science. You need to entangle. Do the classical model, and you are no longer self. You're no longer individual. This is quite interesting. And not weak things. And skills are the same as intelligence. I think maybe that is the most important takeover from this. If you don't develop your handwriting, if your hands don't become more sensitive, you're not learning anything. Either of history, of geology, or chemistry. And the very idea that you can separate subjects like that and say, this is this and not that, that is wrong, proven wrong. If you want to go against science, if you want to go against quantum mechanics, do that. But you will have to pay a price, because it will not work. Because quantum mechanics is not an ideology. It is how reality works. This is what I like with Anthony Chemero. He has actually a knowledge that is parallel to science, what we know to be true. And this is also a way of going into greater knowledge. And listen now, in these days when disharmony is so great and so many burn themselves out and are feeling sick, depressed, there is no wonder. If you know continuous self, it wouldn't even make a point to be, cryonics, where they freeze themselves. They freeze their heads to be revived, maybe in 200 years. It's not funny because people really resonate about that. What would be the point? There is no point at all because you're not continuous. You have no continuous self. One big reason for why people are fleeing from religion is they don't have a continuous self. They have no sense of a soul. They literally don't have a soul. If you don't entangle, you lose your soul. This is what I like Indian philosophy, because there you have degrees of soul instead of this Platonistic. I don't think that's original in the religions of the Nordic countries, nor in Judaism, the idea that there is like an atomic essence to the whole thing. No, it's something you develop. A soul is a development. And if you're stuck in the representational model, there won't be a soul. If you don't entangle, there's a price to pay. But look at it on the happy side. The thing is, Chemero is pointing to an enormous potential of development. And here we can, I would say, this is my first take on it. It could be a bit exaggerated, but I think this could bring us beyond AI, at least AI how it is today. Because the current AI is copying classical model. It's beating it. It wasn't very hard to beat it at all, of course, but we want to go further. And Chemero's radical idea of cognition could be very helpful here. I really think that book would be a great bestseller. And I wish Anthony Chemero all the best with his license of the book. And I hope I haven't hugely misrepresented him in this video clip. Yes, please.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for this nice lecture about Antonio Chemero. Our question, so it relates to Newton. He's a special case, of course. He was on the one hand very skilled with his hands, which people here in the university are not. Okay, so he was very skilled with his hands.
Yes.
But he worked in isolation, and most inventions, as far as I know, are done in isolation.
Yes.
Do you agree?
Yes.
So is this not a case against Chemero?
No. He's isolated himself. But you need to remember, Newton never wanted Newtonianism to turn into enlightenment. But he had no idea what would come, that people would copy his idea of Newtonianism and make it into enlightenment.
But the question is, to make a great discovery, don't you need to be isolated to think better?
Oh, that's your question.
Yes.
No. He was out with people. It's only when he wrote he was isolating himself. Yes.
So even Newton was a social being, you would say?
Well, to some degree at least, because you could not avoid people at that time. And let's say maybe it was 50 people around every day around his house. It was impossible because this is a new invention. You couldn't isolate before because you were part of a group society. He had people in his household, helpers, everything. It was impossible. This isolation is a new thing. You can only do it today. When you get your produce at the supermarket and you get your money through a banking machine, interaction is really, really diminished today, even if you sort of reach out. That wasn't even possible before. But of course, he took a step in the wrong direction for a purpose. He didn't want his philosophy to become the gold standard for thinking, which it has become today. Would never ever be in Newton's wish. I think that would have really hurt in his invention. But I will also add, this is a bit aside from the subject. This last thing, it did not have anything to do with Chemero as a thing. But we will discuss it anyway. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to me. All the best. Have a pleasant day, good evening and afternoon, wherever you are. Bye-bye.